So let's begin. I am Matt Ryan from Moderated by Matt on YouTube. This video will be up in a few days, so please check me out on YouTube and subscribe. I'm so thrilled to be here to go back to Westeros, talk some Targaryens, Jon Snow, the Lannisters, our favorite dead dragon, which we just saw take down the wall. So let us welcome the true Lord of the Seven Kingdoms, the director of the classic episode and seventh season finale, Jeremy Podeswa.
Coming.
All right, so in episodic TV, usually directors get like a week or two to prep and a week or two to shoot. Yeah. You had to shoot the season premiere and the season finale. Did you ask for a couple of extra days?
Well, this show never gave you just a couple of days to prep because they knew what kind of show it was. So with this, you would always have the same amount of days to prep as you would to shoot, and sometimes a little bit more. You would additionally also have like an earlier prep period, a pre-prep period, where we'd come to wherever the locations were, kind of scout everything, make sure everything is, to our liking, then go back home, and then come back 3 or 4 months later for official prep. So it's quite an extended period. When you're doing 2 episodes of this show, you're on it really for about 6 months, not including the time off in between. When you're on a normal show, you're maybe on it for 2 episodes, maybe for like 2 or 3 months. So it's at least double what it would be on a normal show.
One of the things that season 7 was special because you had to pay off a lot of stuff. Like there's a lot of things been waiting for years. How was it being able to direct the first episode and the last episode, kind of like the setup and payoff and kind of arcing the season?
Yeah, for me, it's not so difficult to do things that are really sort of separated like that, but it's tougher for the actors, I think. For example, like we had, scenes with Jaime and Cersei that were from the very beginning of the season and at the very end of the season, and we had to shoot them within days of each other. So they had to shoot, like their whole character arc kind of collapsed into a few days without having shot all the stuff that was in between. So in this season, it was kind of a big deal because there's a huge blowout between the two of them that's kind of like coming through the entire season. And without ever having played any of those scenes, they had to play the breakup. And, but they're such consummate actors, and by the time you're in season 7, they know the characters so well. And were already worked with them for a couple of seasons before that. So we had a good rapport, we understood the characters, we kind of knew what we were doing. And we did have lots of discussions with Dan and David, the creators of the show, just really about what was happening in between these episodes that we were shooting, just even though they had all the scripts ahead of time, really just to discuss with the writers what their intentions were, what their thoughts were about what led to this moment at the end, anything that might not have been obvious on the page. And yeah, so we really hashed it out and talked a lot about it. And then by the time we shot it, everybody was pretty ready to do it.
One of the themes that we're going to have for this talk is you had to pay off so much things that have been building up for years. Mm-hmm. And the first one, which was great, the Unsullied Dothraki horde arrive at King's Landing for the first time.
Yeah.
Something we were waiting for that. What went into shooting such a complex scene where you had so much big drama happening in this big almost battle?
Well, yeah, it's not quite a battle, but what it is kind of like these 2 armies and they're different styles. And so what we really wanted to try to achieve there was to see how these different military groups kind of are separately and then how they are when they interact. And so I don't know if we're going to show this clip or not, but they're if you watch the show, like you've got the Unsullied who are very kind of like stoic and they're almost like statues, and then you've got the Dothraki coming in, they're just like wild on horses and standing on horses and all this crazy stuff. And so you have this kind of really dynamic kind of difference between the 2 of them. So this is something like when we were planning the entire sequence, how it was going to be blocked and staged and filmed. It was really all about like, how do we bring these 2 armies together and how do we make that kind of dissonant kind of energy between them really powerful. So really all of these kind of things come down to sort of conceptual, like what is it, like who are the Dothraki, who are the Unsullied, and then it comes down to like, how do you graphically demonstrate what you want to demonstrate? And then you just sort of plan it, choreograph it, pick camera angles, figure out how you're going to sort of show this graphic difference in a graphic way.
What I liked about that scene, though, while you always have great special effects, you got this big thing, the characters are never drowned out. Because Jaime and Bronn have some great moments talking about the Dothraki and planning good banter. How do you want to always keep it focused on the character, too, and make it about the story from their perspective?
It was always a very big thing with Game of Thrones in terms of the conception of the show, that we always see something big through somebody's eyes. If you just see something objectively happen, then yeah, sure, it's a spectacle. Like you have 2 armies clashing, it's a spectacle. But if you don't have like Jon Snow in the middle of it, then it just becomes 2 armies, fighting. And so, the big thing always with the show is to personalize it, to make it individual, to make it not look like any other version of whatever the scene is that you've seen before. So with this, we're seeing it through Bronn and Jaime, or on the wall, who are observing us. And that gives it a kind of subjectivity and a kind of personal perspective and a way of looking at it that's different than just looking at it as an objective thing that's happening out there. Yeah. So spectacle only goes so far. Like, spectacle is spectacular, but it doesn't make you feel anything unless you're seeing it through somebody's eyes, and usually someone who's got a stake in what's happening. So if they're either in the middle of a conflict or they're in the, like, for example, on the wall coming down, if we didn't see it through Tormund's point of view, it just becomes a big spectacle. But because we see it from the way Tormund is seeing it and he's experiencing it, and you see his fear, his panic, like all of these things, then suddenly we have somebody to identify with, and we have a way into the scene that's not just watching it as something happening out there.
Now, we did extensive research to prepare for this Q&A, and my team and I discovered 2,000 years ago, the Roman Empire did not build roads considering filmmakers. Very shockingly, they did not do that. Now you had, and we'll get into the drama of the long walk scene, which is one of my favorite scenes of Game of Thrones. What were the challenges physically of trying to shoot on ancient Roman roads a long walk with your characters?
Okay, so we're talking about the road that leads into the Colosseum, where there's the big summit between all the different families in the show. And it's the first sequence where, I think in the entire history of the show, where everybody, pretty much every character in the show, except Arya, is there. And so many characters who have never met on the show are meeting for the first time. People who have been separated for seasons are kind of reunited. People's alliances have shifted. A lot of drama has happened in the interim. So there's a lot of stuff that we're servicing in this sequence, and it leads, so this sequence that we're talking about, the walk to the summit, is all the characters seeing each other for the first time, and sometimes interacting, having mini conversations before they get to the big summit. And so, it's a challenging thing to do because, first of all, you have many of the key actors of the show, all the stars of the show, are basically extras a lot of the time because they're just walking behind the people who are talking. But, it's the first time you have every single key cast member in one place, and they're all in the same scene, so they can't all be the main attraction every minute of the show. So they're, sometimes they're just walking and walking and walking and walking while other people are talking. Sometimes we focus on them and then it becomes their show. And then, 3 hours later it becomes somebody else's show. But everybody's in it all the time. So in this particular thing where all these characters are meeting and you're servicing all the story, we're also dealing with this ancient Roman road outside. It's a Roman road, but actually in Spain, which leads to this Colosseum. And the road has you can't tell in the show, but it has a very steep kind of angle that goes down. So you have like horses and a lot of people wearing huge coats and other things on wheels that are being pulled, and they're going down this really steep hill, which if you weren't really careful, it would just be like a runaway train where everything would just go like careening down this thing. So you got all the main cast of the show that could get run over by horses and other things, all being sort of, very careful not to run each other over and to maintain a pace that we can shoot them because the cameraman's walking backwards as the characters are walking forward. So you've got cameras going backwards, you've got actors going forward, you've got very heavy things on wheels behind them and horses, and all going downhill, but not looking like they're going downhill. And they can't walk fast, which you want to do when you're on a slant like that, because just to keep up on that road, you would want to half run down that road. So nobody can do that. So everybody's uncomfortable, and the scene is taking days to shoot, actually. So the worst part of the Roman road took like a day, and then the rest of the walk took like another day, and then all the stuff in the summit was like 5 days. So it was a lot of stuff.
I like the scene because, there's obviously so much drama going on because of the summit, but it reunited two of my favorite characters, Bronn and Tyrion's relationship. Yeah. That has real affection for each other, but rivals. Yeah. How do you work with Tyrion and Bronn in the scene to kind of recapture something they've been missing for so many years together, bringing them back and kind of reminding us of their friendship, but also their enemies?
I think the actors are so great in the show, and they obviously played all those scenes up until this sequence in the series, and so there's not a lot that you have to do to remind them of what their history is. They know their history. And they know what this reunion means. But we did have, actually, before we shot, we had a long rehearsal period for the summit because it's about half the episode, really. It's almost half. And it's very unusual in a series any series, that you have like, you know, one sequence that's like half the episode, and it has every character in the entire show in it. And so we rehearsed it like a play, because it is almost like a play. Like once you get into the summit, it's like all the characters are kind of like in a square, and you know, there's different phases to it. Like you've got the white that comes out in the middle, you've got different characters kind of bouncing off of each other, but essentially this one sequence takes like half an hour of screen time. And so we did rehearse it like a play, and we had to sort of figure out like where our characters sitting in relation to each other, so they could still create this graphic but still hear each other well and not have to speak too loudly, and all those kinds of things. And when they're walking, the same thing, to make sure that they have proximity to each other so they can catch up to each other and let each other go when they need to. So all this stuff is rehearsed like a play, and in that time you also have time to talk about what are we servicing in terms of the characters, where are you in the relationships, and what happened just before, what happened 2 years before, 3 years before, what led to this moment, and how are you both feeling in this moment. So there's always that opportunity to talk about those things, which we did in every instance. So with Tyrion and Bronn, certainly, Bronn, yes?
Bronn, yeah.
Yes, certainly we talked about all of that too, like, you know, how would you feel seeing each other after all this time and all that water under the bridge? And I think, you know, a lot of it is in the writing in terms of the sort of, you know, funny interplay that also has barbs in it, you know, acknowledging the serious stuff, but also the kind of tightness of their relationship and the humor. So it's all there in the writing, and then it's just, you know, once we sort of talk a little bit about, you know, what led them to this point in time, and then what this means for them to reunite again, the actors take it away from there, and they know what to do. And so there really isn't that much sort of, like once they get into playing it, it just plays. It's not like I have to go back in there and say, actually, you know, I think this should be funnier, or this should be darker, or you're missing something, because they totally know what they're doing. So there are many other scenes where there's lots more directing going on, like where you really have to get into like what the nuance of this line means, or what is the pivot in the scene, or what's this character feeling at this moment. And I think with this kind of a thing, you know, these are large arc story concerns, and they know what they're playing. And you know, once we've discussed it, it all comes quite naturally.
I do say one of my favorite moments was the Hound actually having a smile and a good moment with Brienne. Because you think that they're going to be rivals and they hate each other, but they bond over Arya, knowing that, you know, they both love Arya. That was cute. It was kind of fun giving the Hound a little light, actually, in that, and we're playing with Brienne. They both were so stoic.
Yeah. Well, you know, the Hound has had some lighter moments with Arya from time to time as well, so he's not completely humorless. But I think those two characters have quite a lot in common. They have Arya in common because they both want to protect her, but they're also these misunderstood, big, scary characters in a way, you know, that people are intimidated by because of their size or their toughness, their personalities. And so I think that commonality kind of gives them something to play with each other, because they both know the effect that they have on other people, but they have a different effect on each other, because they're kind of almost like a mirror of each other. And so the humor just comes out of them recognizing how much they're alike, actually, even though they are rivals.
Now, well, again, and to talk about anticipation, the books, we've always heard about the Dragon Pit for so many years, and the fans of the show. In the books, what was the process of finding the Dragon Pit, where you're going to actually, you know, for this summit, because that looked ancient to me.
It is ancient, actually. So, you know, a lot of places that you search for when you're looking at locations get ruled out because you're not allowed to shoot in them, because they have historical significance, they don't want film crews there. Other places are more open. This place in Spain, I actually can't remember the name of the town now where it is, but it's a beautiful ruin of an actual Colosseum. And they were okay with us shooting there, but we had to obviously protect it and treat it well, which we did. But it was an amazing location because it gave us so many interesting things to shoot. There's an area where Danny and John go off and have a little private conversation in this sort of like arched column area that's really beautiful. There's a place where the dragon can land. There's the sort of stairwell to bring the white out from. Like it really worked for what we needed very, very well. So we were very lucky to have it for that full week that we needed it, and to have full reign of it, and you know, it was kind of a golden location. And I think it probably was the only one that was possible, which in many cases like this, where you're looking for something so specific, it's like there's really one place in Europe that you can find it. It's not like it's everywhere. And this maybe was the only place we could have done it, you know.
Well, and now you touched on it, but now you have to bring basically every single character that's ever been in Game of Thrones together. And one of the things I loved about this, and overall, and we'll get to some specifics, but how a lot of it was told with looks.
Yes.
Like you had so much like studying each other, because it's really Daenerys versus Cersei, of course. What was the process of giving the actors like a lot of time, because you had to tell a lot of story with not dialogue?
Yes, a lot. I think what was really important was to convey to the actors that they're always in the movie, even if they don't have dialogue, they're in the movie. Meaning that like there's a lot of silent interaction. Like if Jon Snow's talking about something and it's to Cersei, Daenerys still has an opinion on that. Like it's not Daenerys has no dialogue, but she's watching it and she's taking it in, and it means something to her what's going on in this conversation. Likewise, every character there has like a stake in what's happening the entire time. So it was important for them to know, from my point of view, that I wasn't going to forget about them if they didn't have dialogue, that they're still in the show. And so this is one of the reasons why it took so long to shoot, is that even though, like let's say we're doing a close-up on Tyrion, and when he sits down after he does his little talk, he has no more dialogue for the next 15 minutes of the scene. But we filmed him for 15 minutes of the scene because he's still reacting to everything. And so they know, and they also didn't always know like if they're on camera, because sometimes you're shooting a shot that has 5 or 6 people. Sometimes there's 10 people in the shot. So they're still in the shot, they're in the movie. So, but they did, like I let them know when they're really not in the movie. like if the camera's nowhere near them, they can relax a little. They don't have, but they're still there. Like this is the great thing. Everybody came to be there for all the other actors. Nobody was like, well, I'm off camera, I'm gonna be in the trailer, call me when you need me. It was like for the whole week, they sat there and they wanted to be there, because every time we said cut, it was like a party, because they really had not spent that much time together, this group of people, and they were loving it. So like sometimes I really had to like say, hey, it's not a party, we actually have to shoot something, because like as soon as you said cut, they were up and everyone's going to everybody and talking and chit-chatting and joking and having a great time. And it's like, oh, we actually got to work, and then they come back to work. So, but that atmosphere really made it great, because they liked being there and they liked being there for each other, and nobody would ever leave when somebody else had stuff to do, and it was really great, actually.
Now, the heart of it is Emilia versus Lena Headey, Cersei versus Daenerys. What was the conversation with them two? Like, how are we going to play this? Because you both have to be strong, you both have to be nuanced, and...
Well, Cersei hates her. That was easy. Daenerys has kind of like a bigger picture view of things here. Like she needs to make, I mean, in this sequence, there are people who want to make an alliance because they have a bigger thing that they're all fighting against. And then there's others like Cersei who are just in it for themselves and don't want to be a part of an alliance. And so to me, that's an easy thing to communicate. And I think Daenerys is like really trying to make a connection with Cersei in a way, even though she doesn't particularly like her either. But, Cersei has no interest in doing that. And so they're like two opposing forces in the way that the way they think about what they need to do and what they need to get out of this whole thing. Cersei doesn't even want to be there. And Daenerys is there, not so willingly, but she's there because she knows there's a greater thing at risk here. So again, it's one of those things where I think the actors, of course we discuss all these things, but the actors really know what's going on with their characters before this moment. They know why they're there. But also they know where it's ending. Like that's the thing. Like at the end of the sequence, Cersei's going to walk out of the whole thing, and the whole thing blows up. And so knowing that going in, I think Lena knew that she was like even when the white came out, all these things, she was never going to give an inch. Like she's not going to let anything go.
But she was rattled, though. I like the first time we saw Cersei kind of lose it a little, like composure. Talking about that, I want to ask about the white. The Hound has actually been terrified of it. Like you can see it, and there was a brilliant thing I noticed with directing is he doesn't come out initially. Mm-hmm. Did you do that intentionally? Like you wanted the anticipation of the white, like you held him back. Even those few seconds really made the tension. How did that work?
Well, that was definitely in the planning, and I think it was in the storyboards too that we created. The storyboard artist is here, Dan Kaplan. There's Dan. And these are the kind of things that we talk about when we're planning. Sometimes something is in the script, but sometimes it's like, it's obvious you want to prolong a moment of tension, like before the white comes out, because we have no idea what's in that box. And so, well, actually, we do have some idea. We know what's in the box. That's true. We know what's in the box. We don't know what's going to happen when he gets out of the box. And I don't think we've seen him either at that point. We saw him like in the previous episode.
Like, yeah, they captured, but we haven't seen him.
Yeah, so he's been in this box. He's going to come out. Something horrible is going to happen. We don't know what. So to prolong that tension, it was really like, how do we do that? And it's just we just extend the amount of time it takes to take this box apart. Even when the lid's off, we don't see what's in it. We're waiting for it to jump out or something to happen. And then I don't think it was in the script, actually. Maybe we came up with it, but of him kicking the box and knocking it over so that it would fall the other way and just run out. But all of that was just sort of in the planning of how to, kind of make the moment really a moment.
And of course, I think one of the best dramatic scenes was Tyrion coming face to face with Cersei for the first time in years. Mm-hmm. And, death of their children. Like, there's a lot of drama. What was the conversation with Lena and Peter to kind of develop that? Because that scene was, and you were terrified. We thought Tyrion was going to die in that moment. Like, she was going to kill him.
Yeah, I mean, the irony of the whole thing is that Lena and Peter love each other. Like, they're like really good friends. And so, they have to play like, mortal enemies. And I think they just have a good time with playing that, I directed another scene with the two of them that was in her study, and I don't know if it was that episode or another episode, but it was one of my favorite scenes too, because there's so much, like, they appreciate each other, like how brilliant each of them is and how tough they are, but they hate each other, like they love each other, they hate each other, like it's a really complicated thing. But I think they just love playing it, And I think, but for the audience, definitely when you go into this thing, like, you think he might be dead by the end of the scene because, she's really carrying a lot coming into this. And in fact, they talk about it before the scene that he could get killed. As soon as she sees him, she could order him to be killed. But I think, he knew how to play it so that what he tries to do, he gets up and talks pretty early in the sequence to her, and he's trying to kind of stem it or nip it in the bud, like this immediate instinct of her to go want to get revenge. And instead, he's like sort of explaining like why you have to get past, everyone's got to get past their past relationships, they got to get past whatever they feel about each other, and they have to deal with this bigger thing, which is the possible end of the world. So, I think that they both know what they're doing in that scene, right? So it makes it possible.
Well, we're going to show another clip of an interesting characters finally getting their comeuppance. Littlefinger versus Sansa and Arya. Aidan's the actor played Littlefinger. Look on his face when he knows Arya's going to strike the blow was beautiful. So obviously we've been waiting a long time for the Starks to finally come back together. It's really the first moment they're together as a team. Mm-hmm. What was like directing that, the final battle between the Starks and Littlefinger?
It was great. I think because, also there's the big twist in the scene because we think it's going to be Arya who's going to get it from Sansa, and it ends up being Littlefinger. And it just shows like that blood is everything, right? Like the sisters figured it out, and they figured out that, who the real enemy was, and it wasn't each other. And there's kind of like a great sort of justice in that, and there's a great kind of narrative closure in the whole thing too. And so I think the actresses just had such a great time with that scene, and we're so happy to be able to play that note because they've been kind of at each other for a long time. And also those two were best friends, our best friends, for forever. They grew up together. And so that was, a lovely thing. And I think, anytime on the show where one of the main characters gets killed, it's a big deal. And I think for Littlefinger to go, and we knew, everybody knowing this is going to be his last scene, and it was his last scene that we shot. We didn't shoot anything after this with him. There's always a big celebration when somebody dies. Not celebration, but it's like you're honoring that person. So I would say it's like, I think every actor is very sad when they get the script and it's like, oh shit, it's me now. And so, for Aidan, it was like, I guess your time's up. And, but he had such a great scene. Like, I think that scene really mitigated the fact that he wasn't going to be on the show anymore because he really went out in style, with a fantastic scene. And I think Aidan just played that scene so beautifully and really got the most you could get out of a scene like that. Like this character who's so loathsome in so many ways, you really feel sorry for him. You just see he's trapped, there's no way out. He's like this trapped rat, and it's still like he makes you feel sorry for him, which is kind of amazing. And I think his last moments when he's like on the ground there and he has this like gasp and his voice catches, and I think, and it was a very deliberate thing, I think, from the writers that he gets his throat cut because he's such the silver-tongued character. He persuaded all these people with his words, and in the end, his throat's cut and he can't speak anymore to defend himself. And that's a kind of poetic justice for that character. So, what was your question exactly?
Oh, I'm just like, how did you stage it with, Arya and Sansa? You had the great, Brandon, and, who's not been used a lot in these kind of dramatic situations.
Right. Well, the staging was like, it's like a tribunal, basically. You've got like the siblings are there, and then Arya is the sibling who's on the outs. But then you see what happens, like later as Littlefinger is sort of the noose is tightening on him, Arya gets closer to her siblings, and then it's really them against him. It's no longer the siblings against sister and him on the outside. Now it's all the siblings together against him. And that is in the way it's choreographed and the way it's blocked, that's kind of what happens.
It's amazing because it's really the first time Littlefinger's ever had a flashlight shined on him. He's always in the shadows. How fun is a director sometimes knocking a character, not only killing him up, but knocking a character out of his comfort zone and shooting in a different way that we've ever seen before?
It's great. And it's great because, it's also great for the actor to show a different color. Because Baelish Littlefinger was always like, he's a certain color. He always was slithering in and saying all these things, snake-like to people. And then suddenly he's like on the back foot. And it's, we present him differently, as a sort of a caged rat rather than, some kind of like snake-like figure. And, I think when he's got something different to play, it's like whenever an actor has something different to play, it's kind of a gift to the actor, I think. And so he really embraced that, and it was really fun I so enjoyed and appreciated Aidan in those 2 days it took to shoot the scene, because it was just like, he just really so rose to the occasion and really like fully fleshed that character out in a way that we hadn't seen before, and that was great.
Now, we talked about setup and payoff. You have the great moment with Sam and Bran get together, a little comedy. Sam just comes to meet with Bran and they discover. So that was a little nice, but you really now had to pay off the Targaryen Stark wedding, Lyanna, and you had to pay off Jon's lineage. What was the process of those scenes? Because we've been dying to see that moment for the whole entire series.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of, on a show like this, like when you get those scenes again on paper, it's like, oh my God, the audience is going to go nuts when they see this, because it's like, this is the thing that everybody was wondering about, or this is a new revelation, or, it as soon as it comes out in print that this is going to be a moment, right? And so, of course, it's something that we discuss with the actors, like, how do you want to play this moment? Do we play it as a big thing, as a small thing? Like, well, not a small thing, but like, what's the nuance of it? And, how it's received, how it's presented, all that stuff. So every revelation, every new thing is discussed, and then, we play it, and we see, like, what's the right tone, balance, for all that stuff.
Now, we've also been anticipating, we've been so looking forward to Jon and Daenerys getting together, finally. Now we have the ick factor that we know they're aunt and nephew. How did you work with Kit and Emilia on the lovemaking scene? Because it is kind of, we wanted them together, but now it's everybody's torn.
Yes. Well, but the thing is that they're like a moth and a flame, those two. And it's like, that's been teased for so long that they've got to be together. And so I think that when they do get together, I remember actually watching videos of people watching Game of Thrones in bars, things like that. And like when they actually get together, people went fucking crazy. And, and I kind of knew that was going to happen, but it was very satisfying to watch it. But at the same time, like if you look at the scene again, it's not very explicit. It's a little explicit, but it's not very explicit. And it's actually, also it's another thing where Jon and Kit and Emilia were very close friends. So for them to have like a love scene together was a lot of giggling going on. But they were game, and they were really into doing it and having fun with it. But, I didn't want to make it a prolonged, thing for them. So I think we shot the entire thing in maybe like 3 shots, something like that. And you can't tell because the shots are quite long, and the choreography, like him on top of her on top of him, whatever. It's like, it looks like it's more shots than it actually is. But we shot it very economically and very simply so that they wouldn't have to be in this weird, uncomfortable situation for too long. But we definitely had to tell that story, and it was important to tell the story, and it was important to believe that they could not keep their hands off each other. They just had to do it.
Now, I'm going to ask a very highly technical directing question, craft question. How cool was it to bring down the ice wall?
In the end, very cool. At the beginning, terrifying. Because, again, it was one of those things that's kind of like the entire series up to that point is all about how impenetrable this wall is, right? And so you think that's one given in the entire show, that this wall is always going to be there. And then, again, when I got the script and I read it, and by the way, that whole big sequence is like half a page of script or something. And so it's like, Rome burns, or so it's, the wall falls down. You're like, okay, well, like, really? Like this thing that's been talked about like for 7 seasons, and then now it's actually tumbling down. And so, like, it's terrifying because, nobody, I'd never even imagined before what that might look like. And then also, now that we do have to not only imagine it, we have to manifest it, make it real, then it's like, well, how do you take the wall down exactly? Like, what does that look like? And then how do we present it? Again, a perspective, point of view is a big thing. Seeing it through Tormund's point of view was a big thing. But also just like, there's so many technical questions in this. It's like, you have thousands of White Walkers. You've got, giants and dead people, and you've got an ice dragon. And then it's like, okay, we haven't seen a living ice dragon yet, I don't think, at this point. And then it's like, does an ice dragon breathe fire? Does it breathe blue fire? Like what? Like there's all these things, like, I don't know, like we have to interrogate this idea. And that stuff was not in the script. So we had to like really sort of go into, and again, like it says like the wall falls down. It's like, okay, but like, I mean, how do we do that? And so also like what a lot of people don't, realize is that to create a sequence like this involves many, many, many elements that are shot separately, not together. So for example, the top of the wall is a set, which is really only maybe 15 feet off the ground. It's not like, it's not as high as the ceiling. It's as high as there, maybe. And it's only maybe about the length of from here to the wall back there. Even less, I would say. Maybe from here to that pillar. That's the entire set for the top of the wall, right? Including the crow's nests and all that stuff. There's like 2 real crow's nests, I think, and maybe that much wall. And so all this action of the wall falling and people running and all that stuff happens between here and there, not on a very narrow set, actually. Inside, not outside. And then you have, okay, well, where are the White Walkers going to be? Where are and you're making like, you have maybe 100 extras that have to look like 100,000 extras. And then you've got a dragon. And so, all these different things have to be composited and put together in the same shot, but you're shooting them at all the different times. Like you're shooting the dead guys on the ground, people on horses, dead horses, people, like the people on the wall is a separate thing. People falling off the wall, those stairs, that's a separate element. That people falling down onto mats, like that looks like they're falling thousands of feet down. They're falling 10 feet, that kind of thing. So it's like many, 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 many things, but it all starts with what you imagine in your head. And so we start with the storyboard. And I start to I read the script, I imagine, after asking many, many questions to the writers of things that are not on the page, like how do you imagine this, or what do you see here, and that kind of thing. Then I go away and I'll just start to, I do a very bad drawing version myself, then I bring in a professional, and we do it better. But I think, okay, well, I want to see Tormund here, I want to see him seeing the dragon from that far away. I want to see the dragon whoosh by him, and then, maybe it starts to breathe blue fire at this point, and how are we seeing that from this angle or this angle, all those kind of things. So you draw it the way, as if everything is real, and then like as if there is a wall, as if there is a dragon, like you're doing a comic book or anything, you draw it as you imagine it, and then somebody looks at those drawings and says, okay, well, we have this much wall, we have 100 extras, we don't have a dragon, but we have like a kind of a block of wood that you sit on that will be a dragon, and so and then you figured out how to make all these elements separately, and then how do we put them all together, and usually there's one more step in the middle, which is called a previs, where you take the storyboards and you animate them, and then you do like a literal animation where you take the actual storyboard and then just kind of like play them like in time, one drawing, another drawing, another drawing, makes almost like an animated film. And then you do a previs version, which is with 3D animation, where you go into the computer and you take those shots, you make them 3D, and then you can find camera positions. You have a virtual camera, unless you want to see something from high up, or you want to see it from low, or you want to see it from here. You can move the virtual camera around the virtual set, and you can make a new version of the sequence that looks almost like the finished version, but with animated elements. So it's a very interesting process, but it takes a lot of time. Like, to make a sequence like this takes months of planning, thinking, executing, shooting, editing, visual effects, deliveries. Like, it's a massive, massive operation.
Well, sadly, the audience and I are not the three-eyed raven. We're bound by time, so we've got to wrap up this thing. Thanks so much, Jeremy, for sharing your insights and taking it back to Westeros.
Thank you so much.